Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest session of the Indica Books Open House with Otis. For those of you watching this, because this is going to be put up on YouTube or joining in for the first time, this is an initiative by Indica Academy, and Indica Books to help writers improve their craft of writing by providing this platform for them to share writing small writing pieces with Otis, and where he reviews and marks up and sends back his feedback, observations to you. And then when we meet every Sunday, we discuss those, we review, we talk, and Otis shares his views with a broader audience. And anyone and everyone is encouraged to participate, ask questions, to observe and learn from each other. These videos are put up on YouTube, and you can head over to the indica.in website to find out more on how you can submit your writing piece. Today is the 31st of July, and we are meeting before we head out into a 5-week break. So with that, I will turn this over to you, Otis. How many pieces do we have today?
Okay, good question. I'm getting we used to have such a routine of I would get things one week and then we would do them and then we would and then that was it. That week was done. And then the next week we would get pieces and then we would do them, but this has become a little bit less routinized. I'm a big fan of routine. It might not be a surprise to anyone here. Routine. 4 or 5, Abhinav. There's one, I think Vandana sent me a note and sent me back. Sometimes now people are sending me back the pieces that I've reviewed because they weren't able to come to the time when I was going to review them. I get it. It just makes me, everything that makes me confused is like not good. But anyway, Vandana, I think we have to find your piece where it is, because I don't, I have it here somewhere. And then I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So that's 5 in total. And then Abhinav, you sent me a piece from, I think I had not received it before, but maybe we thought I had. And
Correct. This was a piece sent by Srivalli, and I think you finally reviewed it and you sent it back.
Right. Yeah, and I hadn't seen that before. If it came earlier, it didn't come to me in a way that it didn't come to me in a way that I knew. Okay, right. So let's start. Madhavi, is Madhavi here? Yes. Let's talk with about this book review.
Hi.
Share screen. Okay, tell us a little bit about this piece. Tell us a little bit about this book and your review.
Maxims from Mahabharata was sent to me by Indica for review, and read the book. It's basically he has extracted a few quotes, few thoughts from Mahabharata, and contextualized them in various categories, and he has presented what to say, a way of life that will make people's lives more enriched as he feels. So yeah, there was nothing new added to Mahabharata, but he had a few things extracted and put them as general principles or rules of conduct.
So
it's just a mere compilation of quotes from the text, basically.
Right, but it's done as sort of like, is it done sort of like, how like they have
he has visited each and every chapter, each and every parva, as we call it, and from all the 18 parvas, he has collected a few quotes, put them together, like where they can give you a meaning, like in every aspect of life, how the thing works, like that.
Right. So let me is it, you know how like they have these, it's sort of like a self-help book, you know, like it's sort of like, you know, daily advice from the Mahabharata, you know, or, you know, your daily Zen quote, or, you know, word of the day, or something like that. It has a kind of, so as a format, they're kind of different kinds of books. There's nonfiction about nonfiction topics, right? And there's fiction, there's self-help. Self-help is a really big section, you know. Self-help can include psychology, you know, understanding your own brain. Chicken soup for the humans, for the human soul is one that was in the US, right? And from that sprung a whole bunch of chicken soups, you know, chicken soup for the blah, 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 you know. Is it a kind of reduction of the Mahabharata in order to allow people to access it as a kind of self-help maybe thing? You know, you mentioned that things are categorized.
Yeah, like he is not concentrating basically on the Mahabharata, but the ideas from it. He is extracting the ideas, the general principles adhering to which people can live an enriched life. So it's not dealing with the Mahabharata as such.
Okay.
It's not concentrating on the story, the text. It's only
right.
taking a few ideas from it.
Yeah, it's like sort of like, you know, pearls of wisdom from.
Yeah.
And does it go further in like how it might be applied to your life? Does it develop? Is it like a quote and then maybe he speaks about it, or
no?
Is it
No. He tells you the context from where he has taken the quote, and he just summarizes whatever it says. It's a transliteration, then it's a translation. That's all.
Okay. It sounds like from reading this piece, for me, there are a couple things that stand out. One is that you write this, am I sharing here? So this book dwells on the fact that there is a lack of reading material with
This is something he has stressed on the introduction of the book. Later on, it is not mentioned anywhere, like particularly.
Okay. Right, he brings it up in the introduction.
Yeah.
But let me just finish reading it so everyone can. Reading material with Indian maxims and whatever is available is concurrent with the Western philosophy. So basically, I'm wondering if this is saying that his translations, basically he's making a point to say that the way he's translating the Mahabharata, which was originally in Sanskrit, right? He's trying to get back to a translation of the original text without a kind of westernized bias.
Yeah, that's what he wants to say.
Okay. I think that that's a really, really interesting idea. So, because that basically, what he's doing is he's really trying to bring these quotes and maxims back to a pure, like I'll say, a purer form, because they haven't been sort of contextualized within Western, you know, thought, which I'm going to imagine is filled with a little, we can almost, with kinds of Western binaryisms. I mean, when I think of what does Western, how does Western thought corrupt things? You know, when I think of it as being an excessive amount of binaryism. You know, of like, you know, who's deciding what's right and what's wrong, and these are the things that are right and wrong according to Western European, from the Western European perspective. That's what I think of. If that is really being removed from the interpretation of the text, I think that seems like something that's pretty important to emphasize, because that has an influence on everything you're reading. I mean, the reason that he's putting it up in the foreword is that that influences every single thing you read. And he's basically saying these are maxims from the Mahabharata that you're now reading in a way for the first time, because, and understanding in a way for the first time, or being allowed to understand for the first time without this bias, this Western bias. And that's quite a significant thing to be saying. I mean, that's a very important premise, it seems to me. So anyway, I just wanted to focus on that, because we'll see if somehow I bring this to make a larger point or not. I'm not positive. The second thing that I see in this text is what I'll call like a little bit of a scold. Okay, so we as writers, I think not even just we as writers, just human beings. We as human beings have a tendency to think that other people should be doing things that we feel that they're not doing. You know, it comes up. Let's see. Oh yeah. So here's, I just wrote beware, but it's like, there is a chapter dedicated to maxims on anger management and the downsides of submitting to one's anger, which may serve as the key for some youth today, right? It's like, it's the little finger wagging. It's like,
no, three fingers pointing at me.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. When we wag a finger at someone, we're pointing at ourselves. That's exactly right. Yeah. That is exactly right. The power wielded by the spoken word. I would like to read just what Abhinav and I were talking about before we started recording, about the power of stories, the power of sequencing words. It is not to be trifled with. It is a very, very serious power. So I'm glad that I would be interested. In fact, I would be interested in looking at this entire book. I would like it. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's the other finger wagging. It's very easy to understand for the current generation, right? So it's a little bit like, okay, you dummies, you can read this one. I accept it. You cannot read the entire Mahabharata, but read this anyway. It should be simple enough, you know. Okay, so this is the second thing that you kind of bring up. That maybe the formatting of this book makes the knowledge within the Mahabharata that many people might struggle to read the entire story. It kind of brings it to the surface, and it's a little bit easier to access, and it's a little bit quicker. The Mahabharata is one of the longest epic works ever, right? And this allows a lot of that work to, you know, it's sort of extracting the knowledge from it. So those are two main ideas, I think, that are, without the wagging your finger, okay, without saying, you know, I am this, but you are that, without doing that, making the point that it's an accessible version, I think is a good one. So in this review, what I think in reading it is that it's moving all around the place. It's like a first draft, you know, of a work, and you're sort of you've read the book, and now you're letting your fingers do the walking, you know. But what we kind of want to do if we think about a review, we can think about it in a simple essay form. And so the simple essay form that you know, we teach in the university here, and I think it's taught badly because people don't really understand why we teach it. They just do it, right? So I don't like things that are just done out of rote. Like, I was told to do this, this is the way to do it, and so I do it. I don't think we should be robots. I don't think we should be robots. But I also think that there's a reason why this form has sort of risen to to prominence. It's because it does fundamentally work. Even if people who use it don't necessarily know how it works, it still works. It's basically what they call a 5-paragraph essay. 5-paragraph essay has an introductory paragraph, it has 3 body paragraphs, and it has a concluding paragraph. 5 paragraphs. It's it's short. It should be, it's going to be maximum 2 type pages. So that's 250 words a page. It's around 500 words. That's not a bad length. I know that a lot of modern reviews would be even shorter than that. But when we think of a 5-paragraph essay, we're automatically creating a kind of form. So we have a paragraph that brings the reader into what we're discussing, and they should know really what's going to follow. If they don't want to read on after the first paragraph, that's their choice. They're being told basically what you're going to say. The 3 paragraphs of the body develop what you're going to say, and then you conclude. This is one of the things that composition teachers really, sometimes they make me mad, but they're like, oh, you conclude with what you started with. Well, no, you don't really conclude with what you started with. That's not correct. You should take the reader to kind of higher ground because they've done this work of reading your 3 paragraphs. They now understand something better, so you want to take it further, and then ideally you want to even suggest someplace further to go, right? You want to suggest what is the move for the reader to take, or for if it's kind of an academic work, you might suggest where further work might happen. We like to move on. We don't want to create things that are static little blocks, like we're creating a little chunk of truth. Speaking of the Western canon, perhaps, right? We want to suggest that we are in a flow. We're not in some kind of static universe. So in the first paragraph, what I would suggest in the way we introduce it is we generally say we want to have a thesis statement. There's a place where you say what you want to say. And it should be really one sentence that's very clear. I will suggest that we think of this as a whole paragraph where we generally will contextualize our argument. So we create a context, and then at the bottom of that first paragraph, we write our thesis. The thesis might be, you should read this book, right? Because it returns us to a translation of the Mahabharata that is not biased by the Western canon. Right? It's accessible and it's timely, right? So, I mean, I'm just making it up on the spot, right? I mean, writing your thesis statement is not easy. When we as writers work on our thesis statement, we'll write dozens of them. We'll write dozens of thesis statements. You're actually coming up with your thesis statement by writing this first draft. The things that you want to say in your thesis statement are here, but you've just written them, you found them wherever you found them, because you were just writing like, I think of it as like the rabbit, the rabbit goes into a hole. I write the rabbit going into the hole all the time. That's how I write. It's like, it is my serious problem. And I love going into the hole and running through the dark. I don't know what I love about that, but I love that. So anyway, the rabbit going to a hole, that's how you've written this. But then we take this and we say, this is a big point. This is a big point. And so you did say youth of today, even though it was school marmish, right? It's today. So that's that timeliness, right? And you're saying, and you're bringing up youth not because, again, we don't want to wag the finger, but because you're saying it's accessible, right? Accessible, timely, and it returns us to a reading before the bias of the Western canon, or before the bias. If it were me, I'd try to be even more exact, before the bias of Western binaryism, because I just love to be exact. If that's what you want to say, you need to say what you want to say. But so you've written this. From this, we can extract a thesis statement that should, in the first paragraph, be after a context. You know, we know the Mahabharata from from these, except, you know, that contextualizes how we know the Mahabharata. And this is where this book is adding to it. This is why this book now, right? It is timely, you know, the maxims, I love the thing on the Indic Academy website that talks about indigenous knowledge. I love that phrase. You know, it's a return to indigenous knowledge, you know, before colonialism, right? So to put those things down at the bottom of that first paragraph, I mean, it's possible to just draw out a little sketch. Then what you do is you notice that you have three things in that thesis statement: timely, accessible, and this issue about Western bias. We take those three and we order them in our thesis statement, 1, 2, 3, in terms of which is the least important to the most important. So for me, accessibility is probably the least important. Timeliness is the second, but the biggest point that you're making, and what makes this book really good, is that it's returning to a kind of indigenous knowledge without that Western bias. Then we see that we have a 5-paragraph essay. First paragraph is about, what do we say? Accessibility, right? The first paragraph is about accessibility. The second paragraph, I'm making my hand movements here. The second paragraph is about, what do we say? Timeliness, right? If you have something to say about that, you can't just, we don't get to just throw things off, you know. We can't just say things because we can come up with the words. We have to back it up with something, right? So you have to develop that idea. And then the third one would be this, what I think is the most intriguing one of it, is a return to this indigenous knowledge. Then your last paragraph is concluding this, you're bringing it together, and then you're suggesting where to go further. You know, buy this book. Buy this book even if you're not a person who's familiar with the Mahabharata. Buy this book even if you're not a Hindu. Buy this book because you're interested in learning. You know, say what you want the reader to do and to take away, and what you want their action to be. Okay, so that's a 5-paragraph essay. Not bad. It's clear, right? So what happens in a 5-paragraph essay is we basically get the entire idea in the beginning, and then we get 3 paragraphs that are organized in the same pattern as the thesis. So we have a repetition of pattern, but we go deeper and provide examples within the paragraphs. The paragraphs are actually a little bit like the essay itself. They're like the essay in a microcosm. In each paragraph, you want to have what they call a topic sentence. It's basically like a thesis statement for the paragraph. So, you know, it might be, so like, let's say in timeliness, the author's book of maxims addresses such issues as anger, We can see, and then you want examples of how these are applicable in a timely way. So you want examples in the paragraph, concrete examples. And then you finish your paragraph, again, bad Composition teachers will tell you to simply restate your topic sentence. Please don't do that. If you do that to me, I feel like I'm being hit in the head with a ball-peen hammer. I don't like it. I don't like that sensation. But take it somewhere further. You know, that's one paragraph on timeliness, and then you do the same thing in terms of the pattern, in terms of accessibility. We actually put accessibility first and then timeliness. So you create the same pattern, topic sentence on accessibility, concrete examples, right? And then you conclude that. And then you do the same thing with your third paragraph. So you'll see that there's a tremendous amount, what I'm describing to you, there's a tremendous amount of form, right? It's not form that the reader necessarily notices, because the reader is reading word by word. So they read in this linear pattern, just like you wrote your first, you wrote in that linear pattern, just like I write all the time. I write, the rabbit going into a hole is writing in a linear pattern, right? It's just like this. And it can go anywhere at any moment. So it's very confusing to follow it, but you are following this line, right? But the essay that we want to write is very organized in terms of these ideas, so that there is a linear pattern that's created by reading the sentences word by word, but there's also a kind of meta pattern that's created over that, which is, this is the idea. Here's the idea broken down. And then this is where we arrive now that we understand the idea better, and this is what you should do. Buy this book. That is what did we start? that is the 5-paragraph essay in however long it took me to explain that. It is a very, very powerful tool. And if you understand why it is, that's more important than even executing it perfectly. There's no perfect execution of anything. So, but if we can understand that what we're doing when we're writing something, and this is true for everything we're writing, all of us, is that we're creating two patterns. We're creating one pattern that's linear, and that's the reader's experience. They read word by word by word. But we create another pattern that has a metaform around it, that introduces, that develops, and that concludes. And you'll notice that this 5-paragraph essay also is mirrored in another thing I talk about all the time in every story that we write. So the 5-paragraph essay is a story. Every story we write, I say, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end, right? In the 5-paragraph essay, we call it an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, but it's still a meta structure. And it still functions essentially the same way. A story begins by offering up a context and a problem, right? So the context and the problem, that happens in the beginning, because the context and your thesis statement, here's the way the Mahabharata has been presented, but the problem is it's not reaching these things, but this book is, right? That's a problem. The problem is that the Mahabharata is presented within this Western context, or translated within the Western context, or something like that. So we do the same thing in the story. We present the problem. We have a duration of struggle, which is the body of the essay, and then we resolve the issue for the reader. We resolve the issue that was brought up in the beginning. But Javi, that's it. That's composition. That's essentially university composition right there. And then everyone just works on perfecting it more and more. That's really, it's the same form, just repeated. So I think that what you're developing in this first draft is really good, like I say, and we're deriving, I think, a powerful thesis statement to write about. And I think that you work on restructuring this essay and then give it some concrete examples in the right place then you're going to have a really great review. And I would love to read the review again. And I know that my friends at Indica will send me a copy of the book because they know that I can't afford to order it from India.
Thank you so much, Otis. That was really enlightening.
You will.
Well, great. Let's talk about. I know I want to do. This is Kranshu.
Yes, it's mine.
Let's get into this one.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, oh sorry, can you see me now? Yeah.
Hey, nice to see you.
So
Yes.
yeah. So basically, actually, let me. I actually wanted to. Yeah. So basically, the premise is that this is regard the shared roots anthology with on Cambodia, right? And I looked at the basically the story of the initial voyage. So my protagonist is the leader of the initial voyage. My point of view character is sort of his is like the Krishna to his Arjuna, right? So a very unsure Krishna to his Arjuna, right? And so I took a basically. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Yeah. So now, yeah. So, so the main idea was basically I took the story of this first voyage and why that voyage came about, and I connected it with. So there are several points here, like the person who led the first voyage is supposed to be a gentleman who was known as a spear of Ashwasthama. So I connected it with Mahabharata, that story. And the second part was, so you have heard of the legend of Ephesgenia, right? So before they could sail before the Greek fleets can sail, they sacrifice Ephesgenia. So there's actually a parallel legend in India about sacrificing Iravan. So if you look at from like a belt across the India from the both coasts, there's a series of temples on Draupadi which have a figure of the gentleman Iravan outside. So I basically use the story of Iphigenia, which is Iravan in this case, in this scenario. And in the same scenario, right, the goddess Athena sort of spirits away Iphigenia. So the story is that this character has been spirited away outside to search for him. Is the first voyage to Cambodia happens. So that's basically the story. Now, when I was submitting this piece, so it was actually around 2,000 words. So I tried to sort of split it into two, and that's where I realized the mistake. It's sort of in the middle of this. It starts in the middle. So you said that no, there's no story. It doesn't immediately starts up that way.
Okay. Well, where it starts is not. This is. I just want to point out. I've been. It's been a long time. I have a whole new thing where I'm just trying to be. I'm just always just trying to be as honest as I possibly can be, and I like don't even hold back anymore, because you know what? And I actually think that's good. Because it's like I have a certain faith. In our relationship, that we're open to communicating honestly. I mean, I want people to communicate honestly with me. I want to know myself, and and I want to communicate honestly. I want to practice always doing that. And so I include this, where's the story up here? And I think I've already told you the story of where that phrase comes from, but that phrase was used with me when I was first like, oh my goodness, I have to save my own life. I must become a writer. And I went to my first workshop and I gave my manuscript, my opus mundi, right, to Barry Hanna, a writer there who I didn't know, but who I was told was a literary lion. And through this work of genius of mine, genius, I'm telling you, he wrote continuously, where's the story? Where's the story? And I was like, it was infuriating. And at one point he wrote on it, this meanders like a drunk on a bender. He wrote that in the margin. I was outraged.
Yesterday, when you gave the comment, it actually made, so what I had done incorrectly was I had split this, like I had taken all the characters I want to be there at the end, right, of the story, and I sort of created like a series of introduction points for them, and that's I think that's where I was losing the picture of the whole story. Was instead of making a cohesive story, it was becoming like 6-7 different, incidents, and
right. So
there was no.
What I thought that I would do is that there's a problem with point of view, but what I wanted to kind of bring up is, Barry Hannah is saying to me, where's the story? And to me, when I was reading that, I was like, I thought I was writing the story. So obviously, I mean, here it is. It's right in front of you. It's these words.
Right.
And so I realized that there has to be a disjuncture between what I think the story is and what Barry Hannah thinks the story is, right?
Right, exactly.
And I'm going to try and address this a little bit. Okay, so for me, the story was simply writing down a bunch of stuff. For Barry Hannah, the story is a protagonist is driven by protagonist action. Driven by the protagonist's action. So it means that a protagonist is coming into a world, and the world is the world of antagonism, and they are trying to do something within that world. I have heard this said, and I've actually just seen it demonstrated. I went to see a movie that was co-written by a friend of ours. And so it was called Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. Okay. I don't know whether to encourage you to see it or not. I felt a little bit, it's a Horatio Algiers type story, what have you. But I've heard it said that a Hollywood producer wants this one thing most when they look at a screenplay, that the protagonist has a tangible goal, tangible, concrete goal, not a metaphysical goal, not they want world peace, not that they're searching for love. No, they want something specifically. In this case of this movie, this woman wants a dress. Very, very specific. The reason why the Hollywood scriptwriters, ascribe to this is because a story is not about a character getting what they want. It's about their struggle to get it and not get it, and then being driven to a point in which I think Abhinav and I were saying this at the beginning, all stories are about the triumph of the human spirit, where they arrive because of the struggle of life. Okay, so that's a little preamble. To have this direct, so we can think of this thing in story, Barry Hannah is saying, where's the story? And it's not because there aren't words on the page. It's because he does not feel a protagonist engaged in an action to get what he or she wants. It's because he doesn't feel that occurring. There's some words here about this, there's some words here about that, there's some words here about this. There's no force, there's no direction. And it's the force and direction of a protagonist trying to get what they want that is the story. That is the journey of the story through its permutations of struggle, temporary success, and then increasing mounting failure. This is story. And if you watch any movie, you will see it. Movies are different than our work when we write, because movies frame the protagonist in terms of time on the screen. They do various things. They're upstage versus downstage. When we write, though, we generally, the modern standard is we create a point of view. The point of view defines the protagonist. The point of view is like the frame of a movie. It's like the shot, right? Except for our shot of point of view can even be interior to the character.
Right.
So the issue, you know, and through this, I'm not saying, this world, this material, it's all good, but the reason that the reader is coming to our work, this is like my essential premise, and I don't like it any better than anyone else. I want to write my Opus Mundi. I wanted people simply to read it because I wrote it. I mean, what more would I want? I wrote it, so read it. It is I'm spewing my genius onto this page, and I want you to take it in. That's what I want. But the reader doesn't want that. The reader is not looking for my genius. You know, the reader, this is the thing that's crazy. This thing, it blows my mind. The reader thinks that they're a genius. They already do. So what they want is they want to have an experience of life through our protagonist character. They want to be presented with a problem, and they want to wonder what's going to happen. And they want to care about that character. So that is the foundation of story, which I'm just telling you, it's like my boilerplate. It's not even, it could be in reference to your work, that your work is only triggering me to say my boilerplate. And it's the same thing that I find so frustrating all the time too. And the reason that I have it as boilerplate is because I need to hear it all the time too. I feel personally very frustrated that this is the world of relationship between the writer and reader that I've been given, right? I feel frustrated by that, but I have to, I recognize, and you can refute it for yourselves, everyone here, if you want to, but for me, I recognize that it's the truth. I see it over and over again. The stories that are successful have characters that the readers are rooting for. They're having an experience by going through the experience of the character by verisimilitude with the words in the story, and then they come out changed. And I know you've read things in which you've had that experience. I know I've read things in which I've had that experience. Though the stories were different, the experience was the same, right? Though the particulars of the story were different, the story that you had that with, I don't know what it is. The story I had that with when I was, how old was I? 15 years old was Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. For better or worse, I'm sorry, forgive me for whatever it is, I identified with this character Raskolnikov, okay? So forgive me for that, but that's what happened. So this is why, whether you wrote me the note that you were experimenting with not having a point of view, and I experiment too. And I think it's good even to experiment with that. But I'm saying that you're really, there's a risk to benefit ratio, right? And I love this expression. So I think I told this story before too. I'm gonna change football to cricket for you. But my professor would say, if you're going to invite a stadium full of people to come and watch a cricket match, and you walk into the center of the field and you start juggling, you better be a hell of a juggler. And that's basically when we present a story, right? And we're saying, welcome to reading a story in which we all have a long, we all personally have a tradition with stories, but we also have a long historical tradition of stories. When we invite people to come in and join us for a story, and then we do something experimental, we have to, I think, actually, not only do we have to do it well, we actually have to do it so that it's still a story.
Right, right. Yeah,
You
exactly.
know?
You see, how I was structuring the story was that already, in the initial chapter, initially the protagonist and the narrator, they basically have chosen basically a way to finish their end of their days, retirement and all that. They are basically set for their path, but then they basically go to this meeting where they are basically officers of the state, so they have no power. So I was going and that's where basically they are not part of the narrative at all, and they're just ordered, now you are going to Cambodia, or you're going to basically on this voyage, and so they are not part of this discussion, because they are just observers. And that's where I was trying to experiment that how basically they were going to go for another, like they were going to retire to and set up a university in, say, Kashmir, and then they are basically told, no. And this is basically what I wanted to say, that the protagonist, like, most of the stories have this hero who has a big, has this power of choice, right? And I wanted to take that away. So they are officers of the state. They don't have that real power of choice, and that's where they're just spectators to how their fates are, how their fate or destiny is decided by others.
Right. Okay, I got that, and I think that perception of life is very true. That we can see our lives as being very powerless. I totally understand. I think what you're saying, and even what you're trying to present. Okay, and so I'm going to say that even within that context, and again, this is that Abhinav and I, we were talking about my work. These are so much the issues that I'm dealing with, in a way. I'm dealing with characters who are powerless over their fate. But this is really important. We have to find what they want, and we have to show them trying to get it, whatever it is. We have to find it, because without that, we're not putting human beings on the page that the reader can identify with. So we have to, even if it's a small thing, even if it's, Mrs. Harris goes to Paris, she's a maid and she's oppressed by English society and everything around her. But what she wants is a dress, right? She wants a dress, and that dress is in Paris, okay? And so she goes there to get it. That does suggest we have to find that thing. Is it a perfect cup of tea? Is it, what do they want? Because without that, the argument a little bit, and we can debate whether it's true or not. Are we completely oppressed? Are we completely, automatons to another designed experience? Do we not have any free will, or what have you? We could argue about that, but I don't want to argue about it. Okay, because this is not what we're doing. We're trying to write something that someone else will read, and they're not going to read it if they feel like what they're reading is that human beings don't even exist, right? That they have no power. The reader, whether that message is true or not, the reader does not want it, because they're reading to experience the thing that they don't feel, but to have it amplified in their lives is this idea that they do exist, and there's a possibility for the triumph of the human spirit. It might not be reached, but there's the possibility for it to be reached.
Right.
And that's, to me, this is a very intense conversation. This is exactly where we're living when we're writing, when we're writers and we're writing intelligently. I believe that this is exactly what we need to be grappling with.
Right.
And we should, and I think it's great. Like I said, experimenting, I think it's a great idea. And I think I think what you're presenting about these characters having no autonomy is a very interesting thing to propose. But now I want you to add to that what your responsibility is to get that reader. What is our responsibility to this person that we're trying to communicate with?
Right. Get something out of basically whatever the fate, whatever has been like dealt to them, they basically try to find something in that. And,
Yeah,
that's where the idea is that's why they settled down in Cambodia. That's where the shared route started. So that's I'm saying, but this feed was very good. So I basically was able to eliminate a whole chapter in between, sort of telescope this portion of where they basically were just given their marching orders, make it much smaller, and then the rest flows much better. And that's very good. Like, I was like struggling to where to cut. And you were able to, with this, give me the guideline to basically, how to take it away.
Well, but don't just think about what you're cutting away. Also think about really enhancing your focus on that protagonist struggle.
Right.
There's, I'm going back to this movie again, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, but it's an example. It's a successful movie about a very, what we might consider a small person, and a small aspiration. But it succeeds because every single scene in that movie is about what she wants and about whether she gets it or not.
Right.
So concentrate, we're already dealing in this meta universe of words and language that are apparently static, and they don't have any liveliness. Oops, I don't know what I did. You can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so like we're just dealing with these words. They're so uninteresting in comparison to everything else in the universe, basically. But so we have this mandate basically to use every single one of those words to tell the story. We should not have words in our work that do not tell the story, because they dilute the story. And then the Barry Hannahs of this world, right in our margins, where's the story? And we don't want them to ever do that. Because when Barry Hannah writes Where's the Story, he's writing it out of frustration, right? Because he has to read the story because he's being paid in this workshop. The reality is, when someone feels Where's the Story, they put the book down
and
they drop it. The relevance, we have to think about, how is our story relevant to our reader? What does our reader want? And our reader wants to see someone struggling to get what they want with the hope of a transcendent, moment, a hope of it, a chance. They're not even hoping that it happens, but they're just hoping for the chance. And I do feel, this is getting into a bigger picture, but for all of us, when we write stories, I've had this as my mantra for a long time, that I maybe have a kind of negative, if we're going to be binary about it, a negative view of the world and existence. But I know that I have to do one thing, even if I don't want to. I need to give my character a chance.
Right.
They don't necessarily succeed. That's not always up to me. They're the character, but I need to give them their chance. And if I don't do that, then I'm doing a disservice to humanity, I feel.
Right.
I can't go to people and tell them they have no chance.
Right.
And I'm not going to accept that for myself either. Right. So, okay. Well, thank you. I always appreciate your deep consideration of your work.
Thank you. Also, Otis, I just sent you the revised version of this. If you look at it, and I just wanted to get some comment because I tried to use a Shakespearean quote also and try to set it in a Mahabharata times to see if it works or or is it like too much of a cliched. So just want that I will avoid it otherwise.
I think we wouldn't be writers if we didn't try to use the structures of Shakespeare in our own work. But don't send it to me now. I'm not looking at anything until September.
I'll send it later. Yeah.
Okay, Mridula, let's talk about your work. Where is it? Mridula.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Do you have the capability of doing video?
Yeah, let me try.
Okay, no worries. Otherwise, I just continues. If I can start to feel like all I do here is lecture Abhinav. Abhinav is sort of like, what? He's like, what is this new role for me? Every now and then I just just like throw a little dart at him. It's probably.
No, I listen to every word. And I have a blast reading the parts of the samples that people send, and I think it's an education all in itself.
Mridula, let's have you just set us up, talk a little bit about this piece, and I'm going to have you read a section.
Yeah, right. So basically in the story, the protagonist is at the visa center, and the story really sort of in a way starts when she receives an email from one of the event organizers of the event where she's planning to basically go. And that email then leads to like a confrontation between the two, basically starts an argument. And yeah, I mean, it's basically about what happens at the center and what happens in the email exchange and how both of those different stories, so to speak, come together. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so, and I don't know if, I hope you were listening with the conversation with Pranshu, because there's some things that I was saying in regard to his story that are also applicable from my point of view anyway in this story right now. So we'll get a chance to talk about these things a little bit more, and I'll get on my high horse and start pontificating in the way that we know everyone so enjoys. That was a joke. That went. Forget it. Okay, so can we have you read maybe just this opening and then getting down to, if you can see that line that I drew.
With the one in yellow?
It's yellow, orange or yellow, yeah. So those first couple paragraphs.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. One second at the center is sometimes a second and sometimes an hour. Or if a raindrop falling from the sky is made to lie suspended in the air for 5 hours.
I'm sorry. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Mridula. I meant from the beginning to that line.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Out of the cement, there are infant leaves emerging. Their growth is barely registered by the army of visitors who enter the center in iron suits. I tuck my head down as I walk, cautiously navigating the abrupt splashes of green that interrupt the catwalk I've been trying to pull off. My hands are clasped on my sides and my eyes are lowered. I metamorphose to become a solitary insect in this cornucopia of desperation, an insect devoid of a proper noun, an insect among insects, indistinguishable from the crowd. The security guard nods when I show him a copy of my application, letting me inside. Even entrance is a privilege. It's 9 a.m. If I were in college, I would have started making notes in my second class. If I were employed, I would have refilled my cup of coffee for the second time by now. But I'm somewhere between a student and a professional, between smart and stupid. I'm here at the center, trying to prove that I'm neither Osama bin Laden nor the Unabomber, trying to request permission for my departure for 11 days. I silently joined the queue of 20 anxious people who intend to collect their documents or withdraw their applications. A woman checks whether we have our identity cards. I don't have mine, but I manage to feign confidence. She looks at me for 2 seconds and decides that I'm prepared for what awaits me at the counter. I win for some time.
I wait and
I wait and I wait. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I say that we have to give our characters a chance. There is, I think, okay, this is just my interpretation as I read literature. There is a story of, you know, I wrote at the end of your piece that, you know, this character seems like she's really just victimized by her circumstances. The world around her, she's not a force against it, or if she's a force at all, the antagonistic force around her is much more powerful than she is, right? It's society, the world, you know, the professors that can begin and end her life with an email, they're hugely powerful, and she isn't. I've said this before. It's one of the things I go to again, and I am going to tell you, I promise you, it has been the things that I say, I've arrived at after a very difficult struggle. I think, like many writers, you know, we've come to writing because we want to have a voice. You know, I feel like that was the case for me too. And I spent many years trying to write the story. Remember that opus, I was talking about my opus mundi, you know, my act of genius, where Barry Hannah wrote Where's the Story? That was all about me wanting to have a voice, to try and articulate at that time in my life, probably, you know, a deep, deep depression about, you know, what my feeling of existence was. And then I tried to rewrite that story for a long period of time because I wanted to have a voice in the world. I wanted to be heard, you know, I mean, really in a sense to have my pain heard, right? But it was failing me. It was failing me in the world of the Barry Hannahs who said, where's the story? And so I had to grapple with that. And even though it seems so simple, it was a very painful process. Okay, it really truly was. It was a painful process to say that, to hear from Barry Hannah that a story is about a protagonist trying to get what they want. And you have to focus on that thing. You don't focus on the world around them. The story is that character trying to get what they want. After I got that story, after I wrote that story that failed in that workshop, I was so humiliated that I was like, screw it, okay? Barry Hannah, damn you. If that's the garbage you want, then I'm gonna write it. And so I wrote the garbage of a protagonist struggling to get what they want. And I was strangely captivated by that story. Quite honestly. I wrote it in a couple days. I submitted it for the same 1 week workshop. 1 week. So I had my opus mundi that I'd worked on 6 months. 6 months on this short story that was genius, and it was discarded as not even being a story. And in 3 days, I wrote a story about a character trying to get what they want. Because of that, I won't use the language that I associate with Barry Hannah, because he said, where's the story? And I submitted it, and he said it was successful. And he said, you know, I said I was interested in going to an MFA program. He says, well, you could submit this to the MFA program that I went to. And I did, and they accepted me. But I want to go, so it was successful because it actually reached an audience, whereas my other work didn't reach an audience. I'm going to repeat that that's painful. It was painful. It's painful to write this piece that was the expression of my soul and have it be rejected as not being a story. But this piece that was just something I was doing to spite Barry Hannah, that was accepted. That was difficult. But I want to go back to this little thing that I added, was that I was strangely intrigued with the story that I was writing. Because it was a story in which in this opus, like Pranshu's characters, my character did not have a chance. My character did not have a chance in that story. It was the world as it was. And in the world as it was, the character has no chance. That's how I saw the world. But in this story, I'll make this hand gesture. In this story like that, in this story like this, in this story, the character, I don't know whether they have a chance or not. That's the difference.
Right. So can I respond to that very briefly? So I think if this protagonist were to have a chance, then that would be at the expense of the character who is the professor. And, you know, I think to a certain extent, she does recognize that, again, the fact that she's the one who's sharing this story, right, from her perspective, just basically puts the professor character in a position where he becomes the antagonist, and he sort of needs to be you know, shown a certain way and talked about a certain way and then dealt a certain way for her to win, or for her to sort of emerge victorious in whatever way in that may be. So with that kind of authority comes a certain kind of guilt, and with that guilt it becomes really difficult to share that story in the first place. So I think for me, like victimization or like victimizing the character, the protagonist, was like a subconscious strategy to just let her talk about it, you know, because if she doesn't really victimize herself, she'll be very conscious of the power that she exerts right now as the protagonist, as the person who's sharing the story from her perspective. So that was, I think, the intention to some extent.
Well, I might suggest, like, her sharing the story, I'm not sure that I would get meta about it just yet. Let's put off being meta about our stories for a second, because we're going to end up getting there in many complicated ways anyway. So I'll go back to, you know, I have read stories of such extraordinary victimization of human beings by the nature of the universe that it is at times been crippling to me. I'm telling you the truth. I have broken down in tears. I'm not kidding you. Reading some stories about people having some of the most horrible experiences I can imagine. If you look at the movies that you watch, you'll notice that absolutely horrible, 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 horrible things are happening to people all the time in the movies. Interestingly, they're not happening in the absolute extreme to the protagonist of the story, right? I mean, they have horrible things happen to them, but they're not splattered all over the screen suddenly, because that would be the end of the movie. I think that that's an interesting thing to think about, for one. I've had many writers who and this is what I was doing, my opus mundi, right? I was basically Radula, you've disappeared. Now I'm talking to nobody. And I can't do that. I can't talk to nobody because it's, yeah, I can't talk to nobody. So it just, I do that all the time already. You know, it's like in my head. So when I'm writing my Opus Mundi, the antagonist is the world. The world is a monster. When I victimize myself, I also demonize the antagonist. A story, no matter how difficult it is to figure out how it is, and it is difficult to figure out how, the protagonist and the antagonist must be equal forces. Because a story is about the clash of equal forces and what's going to happen. When the antagonist is a all-encompassing monstrous demon, and the protagonist is a victim without volition, this is not an equal struggle. What's going to happen is clear. I'm not saying I like this, Radula. I'm telling you, I'm promising you. Pranshu, I'm promising you. I'm promising all of you. I don't like that this is the case, but that is an unequal struggle, and I know what's going to happen. I don't wonder what's going to happen, right? And if I don't wonder what's going to happen, I do not turn the page. I'm sorry, I'm not going to. We know, Radula, all of us, we know that there's incredible human suffering happening all over the world right this second. And we're not paying any attention to it. The reader comes to our work because they want something too. I don't like it. I want to write my story, my Opus Mundi, right? And I want the reader just to read it. Boom, one way. But unfortunately, the reader is also a human being who wants things. And what we create in our work is the union of those two things. What I want and, unfortunately, what the reader wants too. It is extremely difficult sometimes to find the human spirit. Oh, I did want to add too, if the protagonist is massively strong, right? And the antagonist is so weak, that's also not a story. It's a polemic. When I say, when I write my, the thesis of my work is humanity is a bunch of ignoramuses and you're too stupid to even know it, no one's going to read that story, right? This is me, all powerful, and them, the antagonist of they're weak, they're nothing. It's an interesting thing that, so we talk about propaganda, but it's very interesting in propaganda. In propaganda, the enemy is monstrous and always incredibly stupid. Have you ever noticed that? In propaganda, the enemy is a monstrous, dangerous force, but they're too stupid to really be dangerous. It's fascinating. But that's what we're doing when we're writing this unequal story. It is a kind of propaganda. Propagandizing ourselves, perhaps, and propagandizing the world, perhaps. And I'm not here to argue about whether it's true or not. Okay? That's not my business. It's not my business to write whether things are true, to say whether they're true or not. It's my business to write stories that will be read by other human beings. And that puts constraints on us. And those constraints, I will reiterate, are horrible, right? But they are true. And if I can't recognize the reality of those constraints, well, I don't want to be a person who doesn't recognize the reality of those constraints. I want to move into reality. And for me, that reality also speaks to the indomitable human spirit. So it's weird that that circled back to my horrible, hackneyed, cliched story that I wrote for Barry Hannah. This character had indomitable human spirit, and against all odds, he did not succeed, but at least he had a chance to. That is my fire and brimstone speech. I know I'm reiterating it because I want you really to understand that I know how difficult it is. I've had this experience with many writers, and I've had writers who hate me for having this conversation with them. I taught someone who was paralyzed, right? She was paralyzed from head to toe. And she wanted to write about it as a horrible thing that had happened to her. And I said, you have to find where this person, even though they're paralyzed, wants something and they fight to get it. It's not about monstrous destiny. It can't be about monstrous destiny where we human beings are nothing, because no one wants to read that, even if it's true. She was not happy with that. But I want you to imagine how it is to have to tell someone that. I couldn't tell her something else. I'm an idiot that way, you know? It cost me that job anyway. So, but what can I do? I don't think any of us as writers are unable to see the truth of this, but I'm saying that it is very difficult. So I started by saying there is another kind of story, okay? And you bring up insects in the beginning of this, and it's the story that I call a metamorphosis story. And it's based on the Kafka story, the Metamorphosis. In the Kafka story of the Metamorphosis, Gregor wakes up and he's a cockroach. And he goes like this until he's a dead cockroach. That's a metamorphosis from living cockroach, metamorphosizing to dead cockroach. The story does exist. I call that a metamorphosis story, and I will never write one, I hope. Again, right? Because my opus mundi was that. Or it was a description of the metamorphosis process, right? How a person becomes completely squashed. I think we have to make our choices. If we're going to write a metamorphosis story, it has to be as fresh as Kafka's story was in 18... Who's got Kafka wired? 18 something. I'm going to guess 1800s, but but we have to have it there as good as that one. And occasionally you see them. Occasionally you see them. Successfully done. I've even had a friend who I would characterize the story that he was very successful at as being a metamorphosis story. And but I'm really going to say that I don't think the so the reason I don't write one is because that story isn't good for me. And at the end of the day, I am trying to take care of myself through my work. that's my big long speech. Mridula, you write wonderfully. Your perception of detail is all there. I am going to notice, though, immediately I felt how small this person was in this world, right? If you look at the point of view, out of the cement, there are infant leaves emerging, right? But it's I don't know who's even thinking that. It's ubiquitous, right? But it's this tiny thing, right? Their growth is barely registered by the army of visitors who enter the center in iron suits. It's a beautiful sentence. It is Kafka-esque. I tuck my head down as I walk, cautiously. I mean, we're in this very, very small place. And the world is very big around her. And she doesn't seem to me like she has a chance. I said to Pranshu, whatever it is, I'm not recommending Mrs. Harris goes to Paris. Okay, bring it up the 5th time. She wants that goddamn dress. Do you think I admire someone who wants a dress as their life's goal? I don't. I think that that's probably foolishness. But as something she wants, I can understand and empathize with its meaning. It doesn't matter what they want. The story is about a character wanting and them trying to get it. It does not mean they get it. But I'm repeating, and I mean it. This is my freaking religion. We give our character a chance. And when we do that, I think we're giving ourselves, a chance. What a speech. Mridula, I think you're a wonderful writer and a very, very perceptive writer. I won't say for the umpteenth time, oh yes I will, how hard it is to make a transition like this. Make it an experiment. Maybe like I did to Barry Hannah, to say, I was like, screw you, Barry Hannah. Just write experiment to write that trash story that Barry Hannah said I should write. That's what I did. That was my title. Eat crap, Barry Hannah was the title of that story. You hate when someone writes on the comment in the margin comments, where's the story, and this meanders like a drunk on a bender, and it turns out that they were right a little bit. I hate that. I'm excited to see what you write next.
Yeah. So do you think I should actually try to sort of rewrite this piece by giving the protagonist some agency?
This environment and the plot that you've constructed doesn't give her much to work with. So think about giving her something to work with.
Right.
When her life is going to be decided or not decided by an email from someone else, she doesn't have much of a chance. So the plot is going to be a little bit different. Also, you said agency, and it's like, so I don't think of it as agency. Like agency sounds like a noun to me, right? We're not talking about a noun. We're talking about the human verb, right? That's what the story is. The human being as verb, not as a noun.
Right.
So find that thing, and like I said to Pranshu about the scripts and all that, the more tangible, the better, right? The more tangible, the better. And that's for the reason of the reader again, and all of us, because we want the reader, and it's a symbol. the dress is finally not the dress, but it's a tangible symbol for her desire for actualization, for transcendence, for the things that we are all aspiring for. So it's just a symbol of that, but it's also real, and it's something we can appreciate whether she gets it or doesn't get it, right? So we can see whether she's close to it or far away from it. It's very hard to see if someone's close to or far away from something that's intangible. That's hard to dramatize. So the dress becomes a way to dramatize that. Think about what that can be. Very, very difficult. But it can be done. I mean, and it is done by a lot of people, including a lot of hacks.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we got to move on. I've really lost myself in a lot of.
So how many more pieces do you have left, Otis? You've covered 3, I believe.
3, I think I have 2 more. So we have this one,
Okay.
the piece yesterday, and then we have Vandana's that we have to find in my stack and review. And we'll try and move a little bit faster. Those
I'll put a timer. I'll remind you in about 15 minutes or so that we can move a little faster then.
Yeah, and I think that time was well served because that it was the same speech twice in a lot of ways, but it's really, I think, the only speech we need to hear because it's something we must grapple with. And it's fine if you reject everything that I say, but at least you hear it and it can work on you like, you know, like some horrible worm that's put in your ear, you know, like, or the Shakespeare, the poison in the ear of the king. So, let's see. So this story, Shrivali? Shrivali, do you want to? Shrivali? Do you have?
Shrivali, are you? Yeah, you're there. Can you come on? Yes. Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. How are you? Okay, okay, you're very quiet.
I can't hear you.
Not too far away from the microphone.
No, even I can't hear her.
Am I audible now?
Voice is still a little low.
Okay, I'll try to up it a little.
Yeah, it's still very hard to hear you. Do you have a microphone on your headphones or a microphone somewhere else?
Yes, it's right here.
You might have to just keep it closer to you. Maybe just even unclip it and just.
This should be okay. I hope.
Okay, great. So maybe have I read some of this piece before? Like in a different version?
No, because I had to send it 3 times to your email ID. I don't know what happened, but my mail got lost every single time.
I cannot.
No, I can't. Yeah, I can barely make anything out.
Okay. I'm not sure if you read my piece before. I hope I'm audible now.
Yeah, that helps a lot, actually. When you keep the microphone close to you, that's helping a lot.
I'm just gonna hold it right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have either, except for I feel like I remember, you know, this sort of a kind of a mysterious connection between someone who was an archaeologist and someone from a different era. And I'm not positive that that's what's happening here, but it seems like that premise is in this story. And I feel like I read another story in which that premise existed, and I didn't know if it was yours. And this was a rewrite of it.
So, here they are not archaeologists, but they are natives. And as I mentioned in the plot details, the story goes in dual timeline. One set in 1923 and the other in 967 and 968. See, even the what was being constructed.
Okay.
The excerpt actually starts a little after the opening, where the opening is almost 850 words, so I couldn't send that. I wanted something that showed both timelines, at least a bit of this other timeline.
Okay. Okay, maybe you can read a little bit. I'm gonna draw a line here, and maybe read this. Just read this first section so we can hear a little bit of it.
Which?
Sorry. So, do you see the shared screen? So the Khmer Empire stood.
Yes, the Khmer Empire stood tall and proud, surrounded by marvelous architecture, filled with learned men and women who never hesitated to work for an honest living. Rajendra Varman too spent more time in battles than he did at the court. The unrest surrounding them matched their happiness, yet they continued, knowing the kingdom was safe. Rajendra Varman too was a diamond embodied thought and mind. He was a warrior who knew how to win. People refused to consider that he could be killed, and those who did were too concerned. They had council ministers like Yagnavaraha and Vishnu Kumara to take charge. As the public assembled in the majestic court, Yagnavaraha stepped forward to make the announcement. He was the grandson of Harshavarman I and was training Jayavarman V to be the future king. A kingdom without a king wasn't seen.
Okay, great, thank you. Speaking of point of view, so what point of view does for us is it creates a frame for the reader experience. So it is like a movie frame. The movie frame moves, it tells us that this storefront is important, this cafe is important, this table is important, that this guy's picking up his tea is important, that he says this to this person is important, right? The frame is always moving and basically telling us what to focus on. In our writing, point of view basically does the same thing. The reason I would suggest to everyone, so when we write anything, everything is written from a narrator. So a narrator is a person that we have an author. An author designs a narrator. The narrator tells the story, and the narrator uses point of view to focus the story. That's how I break it down. If the narrator, I suggest to everyone that they have the narrator. Sometimes we call that narrator an omniscient narrator, a limited omniscient narrator, but they're a person that's not in the story, they're above the story, right? I recommend that they remain objective. So that means that they don't engage in subjective information. The reason I suggest that is because we focus the story with point of view. So we basically let the reader know what's important and what is the story by concentrating on the point of view character, who is also almost always the protagonist. If the narrator has a subjective point of view, that means they're another person. So that means that rather than having a focus on one person, we actually have kind of a focus on two people. When we make our narrator objective, then the reader doesn't notice them, right? The narrator puts the rocks on the stage, they make the chairs, they put the draperies up, they do everything. The narrator writes every single word, but we do not notice them writing those words, making this world, unless they draw attention to themselves. It's sort of like when I walk into my home, I do not think of the person who built my home, right? It's just the setting. When we see the cafe and we see the table and we see the man and the woman there and they're drinking their tea and they're talking, we don't think of the person who made the cafe, who made the street, who did all of that. That's the narrator. So just as even a little thing here, the Khmer Empire stood tall and proud. I'm just pointing them out as being subjective. And I'm going to I will recommend that you try and have your narrator perceive of your narrator as being objective. So they will only tell us about the objects. They will not have a biased opinion about those objects. And that way, the narrator will disappear from the story and we'll be able to focus more clearly on the protagonist.
I tend to write in limited third person, so happens to.
Well, limited third person is a way to talk about how you're writing the point of view of the protagonist. Or it's a way to say that you're limiting your omniscient narrator. And we're always basically writing a limited omniscient narrator, because an omniscient narrator would put every word in existence onto the page all at once, right? So we don't have omniscience. It's always a limited omniscience. But I prefer not to deal with those terms so much as just to think about establishing point of view, understanding everything's narrative. The narrator makes all the choices. The author makes a choice about those narrative choices. And they exist on the page in every word, but try to make them objective. So if you're simply describing this place, you don't want me to think about who's describing it. Who thinks it's tall? I mean, tall is subjective. Proud is absolutely subjective. So basically stick to the facts. Because of that difficulty, I was like, who's telling the story and why? Because when a person's on the page, I think the story is about them because of this issue of focus. But if they're not on the page, I don't think it's about them. I think what I'm getting is I'm getting a scene setting, and then I'm still going to find my character, who's the point of view character, who I think is Daruth.
Yes, that's
Right.
how I normally write, like set a scene, have my setting first, and then introduce the character.
No problem. Great. Just do it objectively. Don't do it subjectively.
Right.
When you do it subjectively, you have personality, and I wonder, who the heck is this person? You don't want me to be thinking about you. You want me to be seeing the setting, right?
Right.
It's like if you open up a play, right, and you had your scene and it was the cafe and everyone, and then you came out and it was like, hello, I'm the author. I would like to say that this is a particularly proud curtain, and this is a very tall vase. You know, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
You let the reader perceive for themselves these things. And then, yeah, that's good. So once you get to him, if you could exclude this narrator and you focus on Daruth, then that would be great. And then we're going to get back to the thing that I've been really shouting about this entire time, that we need to know what Daruth wants. We need to make, if he's the protagonist, we need to make him an active protagonist seeking something, and that is the story. It can't just be him there, you know, being a point of view, being an empty camera looking around at things. We want him to be actively doing something. I think that phrase, the human verb, we want that human verb moving in the story. And that is the journey of the story. And that's the thing that the reader wants to participate in, so it's confirmed for them that they have a chance. But I think that that's good. So if you can think about focusing that in this story. So there's basically two elements of this story that I want to discuss. So you have Angkor in 967. And so you want that to be focused around a point of view character. Then you have a more complicated story.
Yes, it is.
But I mean, when I wrote my first successful story because of that damn Barry Hannah, I kept it very simple. There's a saying, keep it simple, stupid. I don't really like the stupid part because I don't think we should put ourselves down, but keep it simple is not bad advice. I keep trying to tell myself that, and I keep complicating things. So I don't know. I don't listen to my own advice, but I give it a lot. So I will just tell you that. That's the truth. But having two different timelines is more complicated by a lot. But in both of those timelines, I would suggest that you have an objective narrator, so someone without personality, and a point of view character that's trying to get something. Is that Abhinav's timer? So in both of these stories,
I think that was just some background noise.
Okay. In both of these stories, you basically need the same thing. So you need to establish the point of view character. We need to know what they want. And we also need to have some understanding of why they want that. They want the dress, for example, from this movie. They want the dress for their own specific reasons because of their specific lives. But why they want it is the universal human spirit, our aspiration as human beings to live our biggest, most full life, right? So you need to have that construct in both stories. And then the third thing that you have is, how do these two stories go together? And I'm just going to say, please don't worry about that. Don't make it into something. Don't make some kind of weird, mystical connection, or don't write any of that in, is my strong suggestion, because it's going to be there automatically anyway. The juxtaposition of the two stories will make the reader associate the two stories. When the reader does it, it works because the reader is doing it. Remember how I said the reader incomprehensibly thinks that they're a genius? It's because they are. They're a genius in their own mind, just like I am, right? So they are going to fill in why these things are being juxtaposed. You don't have to worry about it. Because if you worry about it and you do it, then it might be something that the reader says, I don't buy it. It may distance them from the story. So we like the reader to participate. We like the reader to try and understand things for themselves. And this is actually a very massive principle in the way we write. We need to trust the reader to make connections. We need to trust the reader to be engaged. What we need to focus our attention on is creating a point of view character that's directed and wants something. And then show their close, a little bit of success, and then their failure, show their struggle until we come to our conclusion. So you have your work cut out for you, but you're writing nice sentences, and I like both of these environments. I like both of these worlds very much. I'm very, very compelled with Andre Malraux, and this.
That's
theft.
a true story. That's a true story.
I know Andre Malraux is a real person. I recognize even the name. So the theft of the objectification. This is my new thing. The objectification of people's culture and the objectification of those people is, it's the crime of humanity. And it's illustrated in this theft of these things that are for Andre Malraux an object, but are not objects for the people that they're stolen from. And so I think it's a fascinating place to dive into, and we know that it's a timely discussion, and it frankly blows my mind that every museum on Earth does not return their artifacts to where they were stolen from. I'm apoplectic. But anyway, I think that it's obviously a very volatile place, and I hope that volatility and the issues that are involved with that theft really come out onto the page. Great. And then these ancient time periods, this is just my feelings that I'm trying to add to your thinking about it. But I think that what they had was a lack of this objectification, you know, and I hope you can capture that world too, because I think that that's what this piece is speaking to. Anyway, I look forward to it. Yeah, Abhinav.
So, Otis, I have a question here. This is the opening paragraph, right? And we are often enough told that the opening paragraph is the one that sets the tone of the story, the novella or the novel out, and it is what can captivate and capture the reader's attention. And I'm sure that while many of us strive to achieve the kind of immortality that Jane Austen did with Pride and Prejudice's opening paragraph, right, which begins, "It's a truth universally acknowledged," and so on. But if one looks at this paragraph, you have highlighted a couple of things, you have made a couple of notes, and I think yeah. So how I suppose my question would be that if this is the information that, say, for example, I was writing and I wanted to present the same information, but in a way that addressed all of these points, how may I go about it?
Okay, so there's kind of, so Jane Austen, when she writes the truth that's universally apparent, and I think that and then you have to marry, etc., etc. So she's coming in as a voice and describing the universe. She makes the universe right then and there. It's a subjective universe. It is not actually the universe, because there isn't any truth that's accepted across the universe, really. So she's narrowing her focus purposefully, to, and a little bit, tongue in cheek, I would say, right? I mean, she's making fun in her way of this society that exists so myopically. But I think you basically have two options. I mean, again, I go to keep it simple. There are other options. You can have narrators with personality, but when you have narrators with personality, they take over the story. If you don't want the story to be about the narrator, then I would not have the narrator have personality. Personal essay, the narrator has personality, and the story, and then they are the protagonists in those stories, I would argue. And you can try to show me the case where that doesn't happen. I don't really want to spend my time going through all those essays, but anyway, they become the protagonist. The narrator will become the protagonist if it's a person with a bias. So if I don't want it to be about the narrator, which when I write a story, I don't, then I'm either going to do one of two things. As you, Shravali, you already said, you generally open up with scene setting, right? So we can think of scene setting as, if it's a play, we open the curtain. You see everyone. Then someone walks on stage, right? So we see that we have the scene, we have the world, here it is in front of us, described. There are ways to describe things. You have to work on that, how you describe these sort of setting pieces. And that, those are test pieces for us. Then you have the point of view character walk on stage. Who's the central character? The guy in the bowler hat goes, like that. Okay, there they are. Scene setting, then character point of view, or you do scene setting through point of view. You introduce the point of view first, and you have them see the scene.
Yes.
Two choices.
Bring
one has
the out first.
What's that?
Yeah, bring the character in first, and then I can have the setting explained through his voice.
Daru opened the doors into the great hall. In front of him, he saw blah, 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 blah. He worked through the crowd to the buffet table where there was ... He filled up his plate with as many shrimp as he could get. He loved shrimp. Yeah. So, and the point of view then is always moving with him. He doesn't see what's behind him. He hears things all around. The crowd noise was deafening. He looked to the stage. The king had walked out. He wore his full royal regalia. Exactly. So that's through point of view, or you do it as a setting. The temple was, you set it out like that, and then I know it's the narrator simply giving me, setting the scene. And I feel the difference. Those are the two choices, Abhinav. The Jane Austen, is interesting because that whole book is conceptualized within this sort of author consciousness. You know, the person who could say it's a universal idea accepted that da 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 da. And that is, clever and wonderful. And it's a book about perspective in its way, right? And that's why it's so good. So you could try that.
Yep. Yeah, that's a thought.
Anyway, this is it's a great start, and I think you have a really interesting construction here. So, but you're giving yourself it is as they say in the writing workshop, it's ambitious.
It's like 9,000 words, so it is ambitious.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the truth. When someone says in the workshop that your work is ambitious, it means that it's impossible usually. So just know you're taking on a lot and work hard. I also believe this: when we know we have a story and it's a good one, it's worth all of our effort to try and make it realized.
Absolutely.
So I think you have a good story here, a great story, and you're juxtaposing very interesting worlds to me, and I think it'll be wonderful. It may not happen as quickly as you think, but yeah, great work.
Thank you so much. I'll
Okay,
do work.
Vandana, we better talk about your work, and we have to find it. Wait, I wonder if I should do this. I'm going to stop share for a second. Okay. Vandana, are you here still? Sorry to.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Let's see. Look at this. Okay, so this, I think I had this a couple weeks ago. Do you have the ability to do video? Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Tell us a little bit about what's happening here in this piece.
This is a story about a little boy. This is a story about a little boy who's an orphan. He's working in a small shop, in a small roadside shop. He's working from he's not working from morning till night. He's working in the afternoon till night. And most probably this is a liquor shop. So so at night he sleeps late. But when the lockdown happened, he happens to get up early, and he happens to roam around his locality, which he could not before. So in this locality, there are a lot of temples. But because of the lockdown, all the temples have been closed, and the donation money they used to get in the temples, it has been misplaced, but nobody knows about it. So when the so this boy, he's one day he's been scolded by his master, and he weeps, and he sits by a riverbank. So when he's sitting and he's dreaming about how life should have happened if he was not an orphan. So he thinks and he sleeps out there the night. But the morning he sees something is fluttering in the air, and he sees some notes, currency notes, the Indian currency notes, and he sees, oh God, he has found a treasure, and he thinks that he will be able to fulfill his dreams. But at that moment, his master's son arrives. And then what happens is a history. This is reported. The master's son is not in good terms with this little boy. So he reports this, and the whole locality comes by, and everyone is wanting that money. So, and then the newspaper people comes, and the police comes, and they think that this is where does this boy has got this money from, and so when they try to find out, they find that it is a temple money. So this is
okay, but Vandana, that's thank you for that. Maybe you could read a little bit. Can you read these first 3 paragraphs ending with "This was the usual practice"?
Yes, but sure. Just. You want me to read from?
Just start with the beginning, the abandoned riverside.
Yes.
Oh, I think it just came up for you. Sorry. It was, I tried to share it, but it took a while for it to come up. So the abandoned riverside had no visitors except for the birds and lesser mortals.
Okay, I'll read. The abandoned riverside had no visitors except for the birds and lesser mortals. The waves of the river lapped at its side. The walls of the banks crumbled at every passing day. The unwanted living and non-living beings stacked around, the former being less visible. Yet for Bhakti, the small boy living in the nearby shanty, this was heaven on earth. For here he could breathe the river, most of all his freedom. He loved spending his evening in the corner, for morning he never saw. His work made him rise at noon when the sun was at its zenith. Nowadays, things were different for him and the world alike. It was for the first time in his lifespan of 15 years that things around him were similar to that of the world. With the pandemic around and the lockdown imposed, our little hero had nothing to do. On a regular day, he would get up at noon and work in the roadside brewery shop. His work involved washing, cleaning, and other menial jobs. This would make him busy, but whenever he had time, he would sit along the riverside. In one of these leisure times near the riverside, that he noticed some peculiar activities. The riverside was a usual dump site for the unwanted things. There were many temples that lined the neighborhood. These temples would dispose of the used flowers and other items on this bank. This was their usual practice. On one side,
Vandana, thank you. That's good. Thank you. Okay, I just wanted us to get a flavor of this. I really enjoy your language in the beginning of this. I like your focus on this character. Vandana, can I get you back on screen maybe?
Sure.
Otherwise, I have that weird feeling like I have every single morning when I come out and type, except I don't talk. I just, it's silent, eerily silent. Okay, I like this opening very much. It's wild. I can feel that you really see this environment that you're writing about, and you are, as the writer, I feel you're so connected to it. And I think that this story is interesting too. But there's going to be a similarity, strangely, between this and what some of my comments about some of the other works too. So this boy, I don't really have a sense of his motivation in terms of him wanting something. And you see, this thing about wanting this thing, this whatever peculiar thing that they do want, right? And their actions to try and get it in the face of antagonism that is not giving them what they want. This is the thing that basically is like the spark of life for our character. Otherwise, as well done as this is in terms of giving us this environment, and I love this environment of the river, that the river doesn't have any water in it, and so all these things are revealed along its banks. I think that that's a wonderful environment. I'm not sure exactly why it happens, if it happens yearly or if it happens just this specific time. It's an unusual event. That's a tremendous world, but we still need the character, the protagonist. You have a very good focus on the protagonist. We're not really in his point of view. We are above him, looking at him. And maybe that's a little bit of what I'm talking about. We have the narrator who's looking at this boy, but it's as if he's only being seen. And in a sense, he's being seen, I'm going to go back to my thing about as an object, right? It's like, and what we want to do is not objectify him. We want the story about him not as an object, but as a verb, as the human verb of trying to get what he wants and having the experience of life that comes with that. And so right now that's not here. So this ends up being a little bit like Cinderella, right? It's like Cinderella, where he's a poor waif who's just simply there in the cinders, like Cinderella. And then the fairy godmother comes, this river perhaps, and bestows this cash on him. But unlike Cinderella, there's no slipper at the end.
Yes.
So there's, to me, that, I mean, as wonderful as Cinderella is, okay, and I'm going to tell you, I do not like Cinderella, okay? I'm going to be honest. It is not, I don't connect to the story because it's not about a human being struggling. This human struggle is the thing that I believe that the reader connects to, and it is also the life spark in the human being. And so we don't want to write about Cinderella as an object who either she gets what she wants and then she loses it and then she's somehow miraculously rewarded with it again. A person without agency who is able to have all these things simply because she started off with a fairy godmother and then had the right shoe size, circumstance. So we don't want to just see Cinderella or this boy as an object. We want to be involved with them as human beings. So that means I know them as I know myself. I know this boy as I know myself. I know myself that I'm a person who struggles to get what I want. And I meet adversity. And believe me, I will bore you to tears telling you about it. In fact, I do, probably every day, right? So if you can think about that with this story and your construction, I think you would really bring it up to, that level of a story that's going to be really engaging for a reader. And what we want to do, I think, in our storytelling in general, is we want to humanize. So, and when I say humanize, I do mean something about acknowledging this force within human beings, not we're not in the business of further objectifying human beings. So that's where I think our focus should be. But I think there's a lot of wonderful writing here, and I love the story construction. And now, you know, I could write the Barry Hannah. I wasn't being so free with Barry Hannah when I read this a couple of weeks ago, but I could write Where's the Story? And it would mean the same thing. Where is the character drive, which is the focus of our stories? So I really encourage you to find that, and then I think you're going to have a story that's a little bit more like, do you know Maupassant, The Necklace? There's a very well-known story that has this. It has a structure that's called chiasmus, right? Someone wants to appear wealthy, and then she's poor, and at the end she's poorer than ever, but she has a wealth of spirit. It's a little bit of a cliche too, but it is a story that I'll use Mridula's word, it gives human beings more agency, you know, a sense of agency than the story in which they have a fairy godmother or they don't. What if you don't have a fairy godmother? Well, I guess you stay in the cinders, you know? So I love the writing here. Thank you very much for submitting this.
Thank you.
There I am.
Okay, thank you, Otis. And we have plowed through 5 pieces in a little over 2 hours, 2 hours, 20 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for sending in your pieces. And thank you, Otis, for taking the time to send the feedback. And then in these discussions, I wish they were more interactive. Perhaps we can try and come up with some format that makes it more interactive. I know we've been talking about it for a long time, but maybe we'll one of these days really act upon it. Just to remind everyone, we're taking the next, I think, 5 weeks off. Certainly all of August, and then the first Sunday of September. So if you look at the calendars, you'll find that we should then meet again on Sunday, the 11th of September. So make use of the time, hone your writing, figure out what you want to send to get feedback on. And Otis, the question to you would be, when would be a convenient time for people to start sending the pieces? Because if they send it now, it's going to get buried under all the different emails that come into your inbox. So when should they send pieces?
Yeah, I just prefer to get things, you know, I'm going to disconnect for a while. And so I probably prefer just to get things. I think September 6th is our Labor Day. So after the 6th would be fine for me. I'll be back to work on other things other than my own work at that point.
Okay, perfect. So yes, 6th of September is a Tuesday. So folks, plan on sending in your pieces around that time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Certainly no later than Friday. I will send in a reminder a week before that week, so that people can start getting their pieces in shape. And I have canceled the Zoom sessions for the next 5 weeks, so you won't get those reminders. This video will, like all others, be also put up on YouTube in a couple of days.
Can I say too, since we have a little break until we're going next, maybe I really encourage everyone to experiment, and experiment with keep it simple. Experiment with keep it simple. And see where that might take you. You have over a month. You do not need a month to write a great story. If you keep it simple, I wrote that one in a couple days. I'm not bragging about it, because I'm telling you, I was so mad that I did it, right? So you can just put up on the title, experiment, and just be like, keep it simple. And then, just work on that character drive and see where that takes you.
And finally, there's a WhatsApp group that exists for people of this open house. I have shared the link participation is completely, strictly optional. No compulsion to join the group. But if you do take a line and introduce yourselves. We do exchange some information about writing, samples, etc. So it's up to you. Want to join? Excellent. If not, then you always have this open house. And with that, we'll close and we'll see each other in 6 weeks from now. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.